In 957, Edgar, son of the English king Edmund the Magnificent, and grandson of the mighty Edward the Elder, was made King of Mercia, with the chronicler Florence of Worcester writing, "The people of Mercia and Northumbria threw off their allegiance to Edwig, King of England, disgusted at the folly of his government, and elected his cousin Edgar as their king." Edgar was in fact Edwig's brother, but it does seem as though Edwig, a young and immature king, was not popular, and allowed Edgar, aged only about 13 at that time, an early route into power. Edgar's most notable act during the relatively brief period between his being King of Mercia and then all England in 959 was to recall Dunstan, a powerful bishop and soon to be Archbishop of Canterbury, and later a saint. Dunstan had angered Edwig at the young king's own coronation celebrations in 955, where Dunstan had put a halt to Edwig frolicking with a mother and daughter, the latter of whom he'd eventually marry. It was a sensible decision for Edgar to recall Dunstan, an act of maturity that seemed to be beyond Edwig, despite the latter being the older brother. After Edwig's death in 959, Edgar succeeded to the whole kingdom of England, and these were delicate days in English history. Edwig's petulant personality threatened to destabilise the country, particularly in the north, with Northumbria only taken out of Viking control in 954. Certainly, having the more level headed Edgar as king could only be a good thing for the prospects of future English unity. Florence of Worcester is particularly lavish with his praise of Edgar, saying, "Edgar was discreet, mild, humble, kind, liberal, merciful, powerful in arms, and warlike. These are certainly qualities that you'd be looking for in a king." Whilst the Viking wars in England now entered an extended period of calm, Edgar was not one to rest on his laurels. He prowled the English coastline with a vast fleet, keeping an ever watchful eye on potential invasions. But Edgar was not one to go looking for war either, quite the opposite, in fact. He was a king determined to give his nation peace, and this meant not only protecting them from invaders, but also avoiding unnecessary wars. Edgar's reputation slowly began to grow, aided by a good relationship with the great Otto I of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor. Otto had been married to Edith, Edgar's aunt, who had died in 946. According to Florence of Worcester, an everlasting peace had been made between Edgar and Otto, with the emperor sending splendid presents to the English king, which was, no doubt, reciprocated. Having a close bond with the mightiest ruler of the age would have done Edgar's reputation absolutely no harm whatsoever. Throughout Edgar's reign, the church in England began to flourish as Edgar stamped out corruption wherever he found it. In 963, Ethelwold, the new Bishop of Winchester, oversaw an overhaul of the monks who were in his charge at the instigation of King Edgar. Gone were the days of unscrupulous and ill disciplined miscreants filling the clergy, and in came more righteous men of God. Throughout his reign, Edgar, assisted by the likes of Dunstan and Ethelwold, was diligent in ensuring the preservation of the church with the removal of widespread corruption and the patronisation of religious houses. England was a land that was at peace during Edgar's reign, and that was demonstrated no better in 973, the year that Edgar was crowned at Bath with great ceremony and pomp. Homage was paid to him there by most of the important men in Britain, including King Kenneth II of Scotland. When peace reigned between the kings of England and Scotland, the ordinary people of both nations could breathe a sigh of relief. During the reign of Edgar's uncle Athelstan, the English and Scots had been at loggerheads, most famously culminating in the seismic Battle of Brunanburh in 937. Sitting alongside Edgar at his coronation had been his third wife, Elfrida, who would do much to disturb the peace that Edgar had given the nation after he died in 975. But at the time of his coronation, Edgar would surely have not been thinking about his own mortality. He was not yet 30, and he had sons and heirs to succeed him. His reputation was flourishing across Europe, and England had finally come to know calm. But, alas, such peaceful reigns in this age were little more than fleeting moments. In 975, aged only 31, Edgar died. With him, all sense of tranquillity in England died as well. The church would soon be torn apart by divisions during the anti monastic reaction, and the succession would also be contested by Edward, the son from Edgar's second marriage, and Elfrida's son with Edgar, Athelred. Edward would eventually take the crown, but this was not an arrangement Elfrida would accept, and in 978 Edward died a violent death, pushing Athelred onto the throne. Edgar's legacy of peace had been rapidly scattered to the winds.